But before that, I would like to welcome Melissa Mbugua from Nairobi in Kenya. I don't quite know whether you know Nairobi in Kenya. I've personally never had the opportunity. I was not lucky enough to go there. I hope I will be going soon, but I know that for quite a few months or years, it's been one of the places where very interesting things are happening in terms of innovation, in terms of new technologies, etc. And just a few years ago, there was an article published by the New York Times saying Nairobi, the African Silicon Valley, question mark. Now, since then, this expression was used and reused. I think there's a project actually to set up an entire area, an entire Silicon Valley, building new buildings to develop business in that particular sector, industry. Now, amongst all of those projects, there's one project called Ushahidi that some of you might know. And Melissa will be talking about Ushahidi in its technological dimension, of course, what it means, but also in its human dimension, talking about the projects, what they mean, and the surrounding projects. And maybe she'll tell us about this mystery. Why did things happen in new technologies, in high-tech in Nairobi, and why are there so many women in that world where everywhere else in the world, whenever you go to a conference, an IT conference, it's always 90% men in the audience. So it's not quite equal. There's no parity in Kenya, not even in Kenya, but still so many women. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Philippe, for the introduction. My name is Melissa Mbugua, and I work with Ushahidi and iHub, which I will talk about a little later. The story of Ushahidi is interesting because it's beyond just the technology itself. Ushahidi has represented or kick-started the entire innovation revolution that's happening in Nairobi. So we'll go through the history of Ushahidi and what we're doing now. Ushahidi is a Swahili word that means to bear witness. I'm sure the people who speak Arabic here are familiar with that term. So how Ushahidi started was in 2007, Kenya had general elections, which turned out to be surprisingly violent, and there were killings that happened, and there was a lot of insecurity. A media blackout, and basically there was just a lot of panic and uncertainty. And what we really needed at that point was, because there was a media blackout, was information about where our family was, about what was going on generally in the country. We had international media present, but they were also curtailed in their ability to report on what was actually going on the ground, because the government was chokeholding the media. So this group of Kenyan bloggers, Juliana, Eric, Ori, and David. Yes, Eric is also Kenyan. He grew up in Kenya, although he's originally American. Had this idea that they had an idea to create a tool that would enable people on the ground to send messages about what was happening where they were, and then this would allow everybody else anywhere in the world through the web to just open the map and see the specific reports based on where the location is. So the Ushahidi calendar basically is, December 27th in 2007, the election happened, and then there were 3 days of uncertainty. And then from December 30th to 1st January, when the election results were supposed to have been announced, there was a media blackout. And thereafter, violence erupted. And so, as you can see, on January 3rd, which is just 3 days after the media blackout, that's when the idea of Ushahidi was born. And 3 days after that, the prototype was ready, the first version of Ushahidi. And after it was launched and used in Kenya for the whole of January, which is the period when the violence happened, it was used massively within Kenya because it was just the solution that we needed at the time. So it worked in Kenya. This is how the first version looked, the one that we used. As you can see, there's a map there with red icons of flames showing that this is where the disasters are happening. So if you would hover on each dot, you would be able to see all the reports that have come from that specific area. Yes, I'll explain a little more as we go along. So Ushahidi allows users to send messages via their mobile phones, via the web, and via email. As I said earlier, Ushahidi means to bear witness, and Ushahidi is many things. It means it has a lot of meaning for locally and globally. One of the things that it is initially was it's a software platform that allows people to collect and visualize information on a map, simply. And then after that, of course, once the platform itself was successful, it became an organization, formalized itself into an organization. So Ushahidi is one, a platform. Two, it's a community, because globally, it's a community of people who've come together with the same goal of wanting to liberalize information, to democratize information. And it's also a movement, the movement of empowering people on the ground, empowering citizens to be able to get a voice, to have a voice, and a magnified voice at that through the use of the internet. When Ushahidi started, the team, Eric, Juliana, Ori, and David, they did not have any experience in the humanitarian world. They did not have experience with open source technology. They did not have a lot of time. As you can see, they built it in 3 days. But what they had was that there were bloggers, and they could connect through the internet, and they could connect to each other and to the rest of the community, the Kenyan community and the global community through the internet. So it really, this was a key lesson, because you really don't have to have everything. The stars do not have to align, if I can say that, for innovation to happen. And this was one of the key lessons that Ushahidi gave us in Kenya. The default device for Ushahidi is the mobile phone. And this has a lot of meaning in Kenya, especially because it's the most accessible and cheapest form of communication that there is. SMS, at the time when Ushahidi was developed 5 years ago, was the main form of communication. This was before internet data became more common. And it's interesting to note that when Ushahidi was being developed, we thought it was just going to be for Kenyan use, but globally now, the statistics are really interesting that 3.2 billion people in the world have mobile devices, which is about 45% of the global population. And by 2017, this number will have moved to 80% of the world's adult population will have mobile phones. So mobile really is the default device for a platform like Ushahidi. Made in Africa, this is one of the, we have this in the office in Nairobi, plastered on the wall. It's big because it's something that we are proud of as the Nairobi technology community, that Ushahidi is made in Africa and used globally. And this brings me to speaking a bit about how the impact of Ushahidi has really been beyond the technology itself and its success. Because it was started by Kenyans, in Kenya, used first by Kenyans, and then became so successful all over the world. It really was a story of inspiration for the Kenyan technology community, which I should tell you was already there. The tech community already existed in Kenya, and it was very active through a group that was called Skunkworks then. But what happened with Ushahidi is, because of the success and the inspiration of the story, when Ushahidi got its initial funding, its initial grant, they decided to open up, instead of opening up their office just for themselves, they decided to open it up to the entire Nairobi technology community. And this is what became iHub. iHub is a technology hub in Nairobi, and it was the first of its kind in Africa, really. So Ushahidi catalyzed the jump start of the Nairobi tech community and innovation. So when Philippe mentioned that Nairobi or Kenya is now known as, it's actually the Silicon Savannah. Yes, Silicon Savannah. It's partly because of, actually a lot of it has to do with because of what Ushahidi did as an organization, as a community, and as a movement. So I work, at iHub as well, as Ushahidi. So, and the two are the same way, in the same, same physical space, and we're the same community. So you really cannot separate the story of Ushahidi from the story of the Silicon Savannah, really. I will share with you a few examples of local and international deployments of Ushahidi that have really been significant over the years. At first, when it started, even the reason why it started was because of disaster response, to be a tool for disaster response. One of the key, the earliest global uses of it was in March 2011 in Japan, with the tsunami and the nuclear crisis happened, where there were more than 4,000 reports on the platform, and it was viewed 144,000 times around. And then also there was the Haiti earthquake, which also was a very significant deployment for Ushahidi. And also Haiti was a real learning point for the Ushahidi team on how really they should improve the tool and what really goes around the processes of deploying a tool such as this, of crowd mapping. So Ushahidi, what does it do? It mainly just lets information flow from people who are in need to the people who help, right? That's basically what this disaster response is about. And in between, so all the action which happens on the Ushahidi platform is really about receiving the SMSs, translating the messages that come in, geolocating them, structuring the messages so that they make sense to the people who are going to view them, approving them after having verified them, mapping, categorizing, and reporting. So all this is done by people. This is not an automated process. It's all done by human beings. So volunteers from all over the world who come together to make this happen. So Ushahidi is really about people. It's about community. So how does all that action happen in 10 minutes? So that from the time when somebody sends a message to the time when someone else responds, it's only 10 minutes or less. It's really about the partnerships on the ground. These are some of the partners from the Haiti earthquake and some of the major deployments around the world in major disasters that have happened. It's really about the partnerships between the organizations involved and also the individual volunteers who take part in each deployment. Another case, major case that where Ushahidi has been used is in election monitoring, which of course, initially it started because of the violence after the Kenyan election. So election monitoring has always been close to our heart as Ushahidi. Anyway, it was used in India first in 2009, and then in Kenya as well. In 2010, when we had a referendum, constitution referendum, and also this year in April when we had our general election, the first election after the initial one when Ushahidi was started. So this was a full circle moment for us. Thankfully, this time everything was peaceful and went well. And also for us, it's called Uchaguzi. The election monitoring platform for Kenya is called Uchaguzi. It was a very successful deployment, and we had more volunteers than we ever expected, more support, and a lot more information gathered. Actually, we had challenges processing all the information that was coming in. It's also been used in citizen journalism. This is an example. Harassmap was created in Egypt by an NGO in Egypt to create awareness on sexual harassment. And also the oil spill in 2010, again, the BP oil spill. A map was created in the States to map the ecological and human effect of it. Also, in the Egyptian Revolution, an organization called the Development and Institutionalization Support Center created a map that was really useful in documenting the events, as the revolution began. Also, in the Libya crisis, again, it was a local deployment that also tracked and documented a lot of useful information. And then Syria Tracker, which is still actually active. And since 2011, 68,434 killings have been documented on Syria Tracker. Actually, you can go to the URL, which is at the bottom of the slide, to see for each of the deployments. So remember in the previous slide, when I was explaining the process of all the action that happens within once the message arrives on the Ushahidi platform. This is all done by a community of volunteers. So ideally, if you were to have a deployment, if you were to deploy Ushahidi, a map of your own, you would need to have volunteers, train them on how to use it, and then get started doing it. And usually you wouldn't have so much time to do all this. So one of the biggest lessons from Haiti was that what was needed is a team of volunteers who are always on standby whenever anybody needed assistance, so that you would not have to go through the trouble and cost and time of training new volunteers all the time. And so this group is called the Standby Task Force. Right now it's got more than 220 members globally who are always on call to support people who are using Ushahidi globally. So basically, this is what we say that we do. We're changing the way information flows in the world. Initially, it took 3 days to build the first version of Ushahidi, and it would take 3 hours to install it, to install the software, to download, install, and configure it to work, configure the servers. But now it takes 3 minutes. And the reason why it takes 3 minutes is because of a new version of it called Crowdmap. So the problem that was there in the initial version is that if you are not a technical person, it was not very easy to download and install and set up the local servers, the Ushahidi servers, to be able to collect and store your information. So we just created a version that had servers in the cloud, and now it just takes 3 minutes. All you need to do is go to crowdmap.com, log in, sign up, and create your map, and you're good to go. So because of making it so easy, it's been used so many times since. The rate of use increased dramatically, and now in the past 5 years it has been used more than 40,000 times in about 159 countries. Again, because it's free software, so anybody can use it. Another one of the improvements or new software that we've developed to assist people who are using Ushahidi is Swift River, which also solves the problem of too much information. For instance, you can imagine in a situation like Haiti, where there's so much information flowing in, we call it a river of information flowing in, a flood. You need to sort it out, filter, analyze, contextualize it. And using the volunteers can get tired. They get tired after 3 days. And it needs to get done faster. They needed a tool to help them do this better. And what we call this tool is Swift River, which allows you to be able to filter and analyze information and verify it as well using artificial intelligence. I don't want to go too deep into the technological side of things. So what are the key lessons that we've learned over the years? One, it's that technology is only 10% of what crowd mapping is all about. Deploying it, now that we have Crowdmap, it takes 3 minutes to set it up. That's pretty simple. 90% of the work, or where it really matters, is in coordinating the people. So creating awareness that the map exists and that people can send their messages to a short code or to a certain email address or to use a certain Twitter hashtag. The partnerships around response. Who is going to, so for instance, I'll give you an example of Uchaguzi. In the last election we had partnerships with election monitoring groups on the ground, also with police, with the government, government agencies, with the Electoral Commission. So when we got reports that, perhaps there was rigging in some station, in some polling station, and we verified, the volunteers would call people on the ground, the election observers, and if it was verified that yes, there has been rigging, then we'd escalate that message to the electoral commission or whoever can now act on it. So the partnerships are what really make the crowd mapping exercise happen and happen successfully. The most successful deployments that we've observed so far in Ushahidi are the ones which have either been driven or endorsed by people and institutions who are trusted in the community. That's the key lesson that we have learned. So the volunteers that who work with Ushahidi or who are part of the standby task force and also the other ad hoc volunteer groups do translation of messages, they do the mapping, testing the software, and we also have a developer community, a volunteer developer community, of course, because the software is open source. Yeah, that's pretty much it in a nutshell. So I welcome questions.
Alors, avant de vous donner la parole.
Before handing over to the floor for questions, I would like to add a couple of details. The Crowdmap and Ushahidi has also been used by conventional media. I was thinking of two uses, one by the BBC, who used Crowdmap at a time when there were strikes of public transport, something which we could perhaps implement today in France. And so people were able to say, here the trains are circulating, whereas there the train is stopped and there are problems. And then it was also used by Al Jazeera during what was called an operation when Israel launched a series of attacks against the Gaza Strip. Al Jazeera used Crowdmap for people to indicate where there had been bombings and for people to say what had happened there. In Ushahidi, do you have the possibility of verifying prior to publication the information which are contributed by people, whether it is by text message or by email? So are you able to carry out a verification before the point appears on the map?
So yes, actually, Ushahidi has now, the use of it has gone beyond just crisis information. It's being used even by corporations, businesses to interact with their customers and their user group communities and so on. And traditional media, mostly Al Jazeera using it a lot, actually. Thanks for bringing that up. On the question of verification, each deployment, okay, so for instance, if you were to deploy, if we were to make a 4M crowd map, there's a guide on the website on how to do it, what processes should be followed, and one of the processes is verification. So as Ushahidi, we don't, because it's open source, we cannot track everybody who uses it, but we do give guidelines that this is how verification can be done, mostly by direct communication with people on the ground or by using other information that could be online possibly, that is, so if 20 people are saying the same thing using and they're credible sources, then that's another form of verification in a way. But yes, so verification is handled through the process before this information ends up on the map as an official report. So when it comes in as an SMS or an email, it has to be verified before it shows up on the map as a verified report, as an approved report.
Y a-t-il des questions dans la salle?
Are there any questions in the room? The lady over here.
I'm communication specialist with the African Women's Development Fund. Thank you for this really interesting presentation. My question is really, I guess, some sort of curiosity around the founders. You said they had no technological skills, they were bloggers. I'm wondering, how did they connect? And they must have had some sort of technical assistance to be able to build the very first platform, and I'm wondering if you can just shed a bit of light on that. Thank you.
Thanks for that. I mentioned that they did not have experience with open source technology, but they are all technologists. They're all either developers or database engineers or web designers and so on. How they met was actually online, because in Kenya, since around 2005, 2006, the blogging really became popular. That's when it started to become popular. So I had mentioned earlier that the tech community in Nairobi was already in existence. even before Ushahidi happened, and this was through blogging. So they knew each other from being Kenyan bloggers online, or people who are blogging about Kenya. Yes.
Alors, monsieur.
The gentleman over there, and then Claire.
I'm from CFI, Guillaume. I heard that in Madagascar, where they are preparing for elections, the Electoral Commission is planning to distribute several thousands of phones to people to send SMS in order to fuel a system like yours of information on the electoral process. But it's the National Electoral Commission who is manipulated, of course. Is there a risk for a system like yours who, when it started, was only for people, can be now manipulated by governments or by powers who will start using people to send SMS and to pollute your system?
That's a very interesting question, because it's open source, so anybody can download, install it, and customize it to have more functions that they want. So as far as that goes, no, we do not have control over what you decide to do with the software. But are we directly involved with every deployment? No. So yes, there is a risk of the tool being misused in that sense. And I guess it's just one of those issues that it's a greater question that I don't know. Like, we keep asking ourselves, even in iHub, how do you, as we grow, because even as the Silicon Savannah grows and so on, what happens then when it grows to a scale that we can't directly control? It's just one of those questions that lingers on.
Claire, je sais pas si tu as un micro.
Claire, do you have a microphone?
It was very much in the line of the Guillaume's question about security. I remember during the Tunisian uprising, some people had launched Ushahidi maps of the gathering, and people said, "Are you crazy? You're just giving information to the police, right?" Yeah. I was wondering, since then, have you crafted or have you heard about experience of a private group that could launch maps that could be secure and private?
Yes, actually, the Libya example I gave was initially password protected, but beyond that, right now the team is developing a new version of Ushahidi, which will allow for a lot of security, protecting the reporters as well as the map in general. So you can't just access it unless you have permissions to. So yes, security is being built in.
Question devant.
A question in front. Are there other questions? There's a question over there.
Thank you. I'm glad to see a woman having this program, and I would like to ask woman points of view how this program could help the woman in Kenya and maybe mostly in Africa to find solution for their typical problem, like maybe sexual harassment or something.
It's interesting. I had already given the example of the Egypt deployment of the harass map. So one way is that the tool is there and people who are tackling gender issues can use it for their localized solution. But also part of the community that Ushahidi helps to jumpstart of technologists, there's a group specifically encouraging women to join technology and to be actively involved in technology. Also because 2 of the 4 co-founders were women, so they were very inspirational. And I guess that's why Philippe observed that in Nairobi there tends to be more than the usual number of women in technology. So Ushahidi as the community and the movement has really driven higher participation of women in technology. But to answer your question on how whether we directly drive people to use it for gender issues. No, we don't. We build the tool and leave it up there for anybody who has whatever issues that they're trying to solve to use it themselves.
Une question.
Merci, bonjour.
Hi, Nicolas. I am a student in journalism, and I'm also working in a French local newspaper. I have two questions. First, do you have an idea of who the people are who feed information, sociological information to the maps? And secondly, how do you verify the information? And have you got an idea of the number of errors that exist on the map by comparison of the ones which are corrected?
To answer the verification question, we have a process, so guidelines that we have for anybody who wants to deploy a map that they must follow for the information to then be, true and genuine information. We have control. We have access to the data from the deployments that we have, implemented as Ushahidi. So, for instance, the Kenyan map. We are the ones who are partly involved in it, so we have access to that data. And please repeat your first question.
Wondering if you knew who are the people who feed in information. Are they people who already use other technological tools? Are they just standard people, or are they people who are already technologically committed or engaged citizens?
Okay, interesting question. So Ushahidi was built for the ordinary citizen to be able to have a voice. So, and which is why we focused on the mobile phone, because through a simple SMS, you can send your message. So most of the users, most of the people who submit messages are, just local citizens in whichever region that they are. They're not necessarily technologically savvy, or, they don't need, all they need to know is that they should send an SMS to a particular number or an email to a particular number, to a particular address, or tweet, using a certain hashtag, and the information will be collected. It's the organization or the individuals who are running the map who need to have some form of technological awareness. And then the identity of reporters is usually anonymous, even to the people collecting the information, for obvious reasons.
Are there any other questions? Yes, there's a question in front here.
Oui, bonjour.
Hello, Pauline Benali. I am a student journalist and I work in a local radio station in France, and I have a question. Crowdmapping is used to alert for an event, but do you have examples where crowdmapping has allowed progress? For example, for sexual harassment, if there have been laws afterwards which were decreed thanks to that crowdmapping?
That's a very interesting challenge as well, monitoring and evaluating the impact of the information on the maps. I have to say, no, we have not actively, seeked out this information. But then, for instance, like with the Syria map, they've been collecting information since 2011. So that's, I think, one of the longest running maps that have existed. Usually, the uses for Ushahidi have been very short, for very short bursts of time. With the Uchaguzi, the latest Kenyan election map, research was involved. A research and analysis team was involved, and they're actually still doing follow-up monitoring of, things that are being said about politics on the internet by Kenyans. But this is the first time we're experimenting with this, and a report will be released actually, I think this month, end of this month, about that. So this is the first time we are actively trying to monitor and evaluate the impact after.
Perhaps to widen the answer to this very interesting question in terms of impact, the New York Times has just launched a lot of work to try to find indicators to measure the impact of information, because it's true that at the moment on the internet we measure the number of visits, but we don't measure the impact whether it has changed someone's life, whether a law has been decreed. I think that this is a debate which is only just starting, but which will be interesting. I have another question. Melissa has talked about the community in iHub or Ushahidi. This community is in Nairobi or elsewhere, often in traditional companies and in conventional media in particular. We think about human resources as being the in-house staff, the people with whom you work, but what is the nature of this community, and how does it differ when today you're developing what you're working on the internet and you're not only working with people whom you actually know? Can you describe to us what it's like?
Yes. So one of the initiatives, actually, to answer your question, that we've started at the iHub is to organize the members. So to join iHub, you need to apply. It's not difficult, but you need to apply so that we can verify that you actually exist and you're a technologist. And what we are doing is through a series of tests, again, that are done online. So you can go to a certain platform and take tests in your development skills and how much you know about databases or whatever aspect of technology you're in. And then based on your scores, then you get into a pool of consultants who then we can connect to an organization that's trying to build some certain tool. So we're also experimenting on that front, working with people who are not officially employed in the same place, looking at human resource as not only the people, but the lessons and the knowledge that they have collectively, also the processes that they've developed, which is also an asset, and it's created by humans. So we see human resource as more than just the person themselves, but also what they produce, and over time, what this means, what all this information means, and what all this knowledge and skill and experience means, and how can it be passed on, so that for the people, future members of iHub, or just people within Nairobi can gain from this.
How do you mix profiles?
Pardon? Mix profiles?
Developers, sociologists, anthropologists, journalists, whatever?
Yes. So we have, in our membership, we allow anybody who is running a project that has to do with technology, so they don't have to be necessarily themselves, a developer or an engineer or something. So we have researchers, we have entrepreneurs, social researchers, like you're saying, bloggers, journalists, and so on. So the profile of people is very mixed. And then interestingly, since iHub iHub was formed in 2010, there have been so many other hubs and spaces, similar spaces in Nairobi and all over Africa as well, more than 20 actually in cities across Africa that have to do with social enterprise, with arts and culture and so on. And we are all still part of a network. At least in Nairobi, we still all interact with the other technologically focused hubs and spaces. So again, we're all about catalyzing the Nairobi community, technology community. Well, some people say when we say just technology community, we are kind of limiting ourselves, yet the impact has been so much more than technology, because a lot of the other hubs have actually taken their model from iHub. But yes, it's pretty dynamic and experimental.
Y a-t-il une dernière question? Oui, il y a une question.
And just a last question. There is one over here and one here. We'll take two last questions. We will start over here. And hi, Edith Brou. I am a blogger. I wanted to know whether your type of crowd mapping in the fight against sexual harassment can this tool be used by the police or the authorities? Because it's great to do crowd mapping and to identify areas where this happens, or to indicate cases, But do you think that it's good or not that the police should also be able to use this tool, for example, to imprison the perpetrators? What do you think?
One of the areas we're pushing for now is the customization of the software for public services, government services. So we are working to push for, at least in Kenya, because we have direct access to the government in Kenya. And now that our government structure has changed, this has presented a unique, since the April election, it has presented a unique opportunity for us to go and pitch the things that all technology like this can do. And yes, we are working. Ideally, it should be usable in cases like for the police to actually be able to see on a map what's where crime is happening and respond and so on. So yes, we are actively pushing towards having that done in Kenya at least.
Et nous allons prendre une dernière question au fond et puis juste pour
A last question at the back, and just to answer Edith, just the simple fact of demonstrating a reality which we didn't see up until now is already producing something which is interesting, even if, of course, that doesn't completely answer your question.
Hello, I'm from Vietnam Television. Thank you, Malaysia. I have heard about Ushahidi last year. I could say it is very famous in the world. And I would like to ask you whether conventional media in your country, did they promote Ushahidi and how? And do you collaborate with traditional media?
No, they don't. And we do, like I have interacts with the traditional media organizations, and they have partnerships, like they want to see what innovation is going on and to try and adopt some of those tools into the organizations, but they've never really actively used Ushahidi. And we think it's just because of whatever relations and awkwardness that might arise with their relations with government and so on. I should note, however, it would be interesting for you to know that we've had in Kenya the Open Government Initiative, which of course has been met with extremely high resistance, and Ushahidi is seen as part of that. So no, traditional media generally tries to be friendly, but not too friendly.
On va refermer ce focus, mais bien sûr.
So we will end this focus group, but of course you can continue to discuss with Melissa, whom I thank for having shared her experience, which both of Ushahidi and what is going on. And I get the impression that there are some very interesting things going on over there. And in fact, Guillaume over there is currently preparing a 4M meeting for CFI in Nairobi. And I'm sure this will be particularly interesting to be able to actually go and see close at hand your experiences on the ground. Thank you to Melissa, and we will applaud her and the whole Ushahidi team.